with his ability to govern his own conscience, his will, character, his thoughts, his ideas, his motives, the level of conviction, his attitudes, and how a man governs himself affects his external actions, his speech, his conduct, even his use of property, for example. And I'll tell you, just to quote a Dutch scholar, I can't think of Hugo Grotius. Is that how you say his name, Marshall?
Grotius.
Yeah. Grotius. I just have a quote here I'd like to read what he said about self-government, and then I'd like you guys to weigh in. And how important this flow from the bottom up, so to speak. He said, he knows not how to rule a kingdom that cannot manage a province, nor can he manage a province that cannot order a city, nor he order a city that knows not how to regulate a village, nor he a village that cannot guide a family, nor can he govern well a family that knows not how to govern himself. And he cannot govern himself unless his reason is from the Lord, and that his reason be ruled by God and obedient to God and his word. Stated another way, right, you must govern yourself before you can rule others. And I think the Bible teaches that rulers must be self-governed, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, if you simply go to Psalm 1:1, it says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits at the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and he meditates on that, and he becomes like a tree planted by channels of water, that in its day will put forth its fruit." I think that analogy fits perfect. If you're not governing internally, the fruit that shows up externally will not produce new fruit. And if you're governed internally, you will produce good fruit, and that, of course, can multiply. If wicked ideas are in your mind and your heart, that's what's going to come out. And how can you govern a family if your starting point is bad?
Right. So go ahead, Marshall.
Analogy and drive it home to the nation. And I think it's good for us to get this perspective, because a lot of people think that there are many ways to govern the nation. There's many ways to go that will result in blessing. And everybody has their own opinion. So we just can't everybody just do their own thing? Can't we just get along, as Rodney King said back in 1992? Many of us in California remember. No, we can't just get along with any worldview or philosophy if we want to be free. Because if men will not govern themselves, then they will be governed from the outside. What I mean by that, they will be made slaves. They will be made pawns of a bureaucracy that will take away their lives, their freedom. It will educate their children. It will take everything that individuals in America have enjoyed for the last 400 years. And there is no exception here, and it's not many different paths. As either we turn back to the path that was the foundation that brought the liberty, or we will end up like all other nations through the ages that have ended up not being self-governed, decided to go to vice, for example, like Rome, do my own thing, I'm just going to have sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and can I have welfare too? Can I have a free society too? No, you can't. You're going to destroy that free society, where then everyone in the society will be slaves.
And Marshall, isn't the piggyback to that is we become then a consumer, not a producer. We continually consume what we want instead of produce something. And I think that's a fundamental problem in the current. The nation is designed to consume. If people actually slowed down their consumption, our current form of economics would begin to collapse. And it's the wrong approach. We need to become producers. And I think you're really tapping on that, because people say, well, can't I just do whatever I want? Well, pretty soon you begin to consume other people's stuff. In other words, I need what you have to do what I want, but the reality is I may not want to give that person what I have so they can do what they want. And that's why it eventually reaches out and becomes a control and a seizing by plunder principle or mob rule one group of people from another based on who has the most guys with the most swords. And it's the wrong way to go.
Yeah, and one quality of, you put it in the perspective of the church, was that a church leader managed his own household well and keeping his children under control with dignity. And if he didn't know how to manage his own household, how could he take care of the church? And this same principle applies, and that's from the book of Timothy. The same principle applies to civil government leaders who are attempting to govern their nation. If they're unable to effectively control their own lives or their families, how could they govern a city or a state? And I think these...
Interesting. I got a degree in economics at the University of California and never learned much because by the time I was taking the degree, everything was Keynesian socialistic.
Yeah.
But one thing that they did do is define economics. Economics, ultimately, if you go to the original meaning, was family governance or family economics. It goes down to the family, that as one governs the family and family finances, that is the foundation of all economic theory. Well, in reality, look at what's happened. Can my family live on 40% debt, which is what's going on with the federal government right now? All of our military and all of our welfare system is based upon borrowing, $4 billion a day just to keep the government afloat. Well, I can't do that in my personal checkbook. I don't know about you guys, but I'd be under in a minute. Now the federal government, not following those principles, is falling apart and bringing us with them. And that's just because we have broken the basic economic principles of the universe. They do not change. You can play the game of stealing for a while, especially when you've been as blessed as America. We have basically eaten our children's inheritance. It could be one of the greatest sins of the century of civilizations, that the most blessed civilization that the world has ever known has, within 1 to 2 generations, literally destroyed the future of dozens of generations in the future. That is a sin of a magnitude we can't even comprehend.
So the solution here is that effective government begins with the individual learning to govern himself. And the more internal government a person has under obedience to the Creator and his standards is found in the Bible, the less external government is needed, right?
That's right.
Consequently, though, when that doesn't happen...
If they do not govern themselves, then they will be governed. Yep.
Right. And the opposite of that...
We'll be told everything about everything, and now the kids, supposedly today it came out that they're going to control now that you can't play certain kinds of things like dodgeball when you go to camps anymore because, the kids could get hurt. And so the federal government's putting up regulations on anybody that wants to have a camp anywhere in the world, that these are the sports they need to watch out for, and then you need to have special counselors. And I mean, my goodness, every area of our lives now is being controlled by the government. Our founding fathers would roll over in the grave. They would have started an American Revolution probably 25 years ago, faced with what we're facing, and yet most of us are just not even aware of it.
Well, that's it. As people in our nation become less self-governed and give up power, the civil government will grow and grow. They'll be making more and more laws, many outside the realm of its jurisdiction, as we see now, the one you just mentioned, Marshall, and spending more and more money. And so really, the lack of self-government here in the individual leads to a greater centralized government, external government, which results in loss of individual liberty. And boy, that's a very compelling argument for us to...
It really gets down to practical elements when we face our own lives and realize that about 70% of the American people are on the government dole.
Gosh, that's a shocking statistic, Marshall. Well, thank you. We're going to take a quick break right now for a message from our sponsor, Park and Go. When you think travel, think Park and Go. Airport and cruise parking, serving the Fort Lauderdale International Airport and the cruise ships at Port Everglades. Book in advance online at parkandgo.net. Free bottled water for customers. I-595 to the Port Everglades exit. Park and Go. We're back with John Bona.
Okay, we're back. I think we lost Marshall there. Are you there, Marshall?
He is not. It's Dan and John.
Okay, great, Dan. We'll weigh in there. We've got a minute left here before the break.
You know, I was listening to Marshall talk about how many people are finding themselves literally reliant on the government to take care of them from the womb to the tomb. And, you know, it's difficult because you do see people with great needs, but the reality is we as a whole culture have to realize that the God that we're going to depend on needs to be the God of the Bible, and that the government God can take away from us just as quickly as it gives out, and will use that same principle to control us. That has been the story of all the tyrants of history. And so the resistance to that temptation has to be built into the very way we think. I know that for the homeschool people out there, you know, we've already kind of said no. And we're going to do this differently, and we're going to raise our children differently, and we're going to put different principles in their heart than maybe is provided within the government indoctrinational system. And that is a biblical standard that goes all the way back to 1 Kings when Rehoboam was going to tax the tribes of Israel after, you know, he's the son of Solomon. And the northern tribes say, no, we're going to move out and do other things because we have a king separate from you, Rehoboam, and you are doing things that are unrighteous. And then they separated and became their own kingdom to the north. So the standard is out there to separate if necessary. And I look at homeschoolers as a small group that is growing rapidly that have said, no, we're not going to be under the government and its control.
Okay.
But we're going to do something different.
All right, Dan, we're just going to break away, and with the story of liberty, we'll be right back.